In this video, we're going to look at how to digitize shapes. And so we'll be looking at these tools over here on the left-hand side, the Digitize New Object and the Auto Digitize New Object. And the way that these tools interact with the actual stitch types over here with the drop-down menu. So what I'm saying is, depending on what you have selected on this side, will depend on how the tools will work over here. So when I select manual as my stitch type, then when I come over here, first of all, the Auto Digitize tool is not available. It's grayed out. And that's because we don't need this sort of second tool for the manual type. We simply need the one tool. So some of the stitch types, if I change this to, let's say, satin, then I have both tools, the Digitize and the Auto Digitize. And they'll, I guess, give us different ways to create a satin object. So I'll go through each one of the styles of objects, styles of stitches, and then show how to create shapes based upon those styles of stitches. Yeah, and then in the next video, I'll come back and I'll review all of these different properties and how they relate to the different styles of stitches, because of course they'll change. When I have the manual stitch, I have basically one main setting, which is the maximum length. And so why don't we start right here with the manual choice. And when I come over here and I select the Digitize tool, now notice at the bottom of the sort of left-hand corner of the workspace, it says enter the points of the polyline to punch. And basically what that says to me is draw your line. And I simply click to put the points in for the line. And every time I click, it puts in a new point, and I can put in as many points as I want. When I right-click, I let go. And if I right click again, it lets go of the tool, and I'm kind of back at square one again, where I could change and use a different tool or select a new type of stitch or whatever. So the thing to kind of keep in mind with manual is it's very much what it sounds like. You're going to digitize each and every stitch point. Now, if I zoom in closely over the stitches that I made, I'll show you that, first of all, I'm just going to type P on my keyboard to hide the sort of three-dimensional preview, and show you here I have an option to show stitch marks. And so this puts like a little dot over every needle penetration. Now, notice if I use this manual tool to digitize another line, and I can put in my points as I want to. Now, if I put in a longer point, and then I'll just finish up here, right click to let go, notice what it did for the longer point. So I'm going to just click off to let go. So I put a point here, and I put a point here, and I put a point here, and I put a point here. Now, it's inserted points along that line. It has a maximum stitch length, and anything beyond, so if I put 2 points that are longer than whatever is set here as the maximum stitch length, the software will put points in between. But that's really why it's called the manual tool, because it's meant to allow you to go in and digitize very small or very detailed, very specific things where you want to control each and every needle point. Anyhow, that's the manual tool, and pretty simple to use. You just simply select the choice manual, select the tool, and start digitizing the points that you want in the places that you want them. When you right click, you let go, and you've finished creating that object. So what we'll do is we'll go through each of the tools in the object property toolbox. And the next, I guess, type of stitch I'd like to create is the running stitch. So we'll just change from the manual to the running. And again, the Auto Digitize tool is not available. However, the Digitize tool is, and it's very similar to the manual tool. The only real difference here is you'll notice right away that when I start putting points, that the point that I'm creating affects the shape of the line of the previous point. And so what I'm getting is a natural curve that I can draw. And yeah, so I guess we get to adjust the shape of the line by how we move our points around. Now, again, right-click to let go, and right-click to finish. Now, the main thing here that you'll notice differently is the software inserts points along that line that I drew. So I didn't insert all of these points. The software puts them in, and the software puts them in based upon the stitch length, which is over here on the right hand side. You can see 2.5 millimeters is the stitch length, and so every 2.5 millimeters the software will place a point along my line. So if you want to create, and I'll just start another run stitch line here, if you want to create a line that has corners, so like I did with the manual, you can hold the shift key down, and that allows you to place points that don't curve. Otherwise, if you don't have the shift key held down, then your lines will continue along, forward, forward, forward. Now, in a right click, it ends digitizing, and then if I press right click again, it will end making the shape, and if I press right click again, it will end using the shape. Now, there was an extra right click in there compared to the manual stitch, and that's because I can actually, I guess, join run stitches together. So right now you'll notice that this run stitch and this run stitch are sort of separate lines. So what I'll do is I'll just move down a little bit, turn on the tool, and start by creating a run line. And then I'll right click to let go. And now I could draw another run line right here. So, and right click to let go, and maybe another run line here. Right click to let go. And so you can add several lines into, I guess, a joined group. Now I'll right click to let go, and I'll right click to stop making it. Right click to let go of the tool, and you can see what's happened is all of the lines in my group have become joined, and therefore there's no, I guess, jumps in between them. So the software recognizes that they're going to be always kept together. And so that's something that's a little bit different about using the run stitch tool, is that when you're finished drawing the first line, you can immediately draw another line. So I'll just do it one more time here. There's a line, right click, okay, draw another line, right click to finish using it, and it allows me to draw the exit point. So if I know that I would like this object to finish sewing here for, to lead into what's coming next, I can click on that point, and then it finishes making the shape, and I can right click to let go of the tool and end the operation. So that's the way the run stitch line works, sort of differently than the manual. So let's take a look at the next style of stitch, and just looking down the list before I go on to, I guess, the next one, which would be satin, I think I'll skip ahead and show satin serial. And the reason is, to me, manual, running, and satin serial are all very similar styles of objects because they all kind of revolve around drawing the center line. And I'll just go ahead and show, again, no auto digitize, just the simple single digitize tool. And I'll just go ahead and draw a line. So very similar to the run line tool where it automatically wants to curve. And again, if I hold shift down, I can get it to be straight. Now, when I right click, it finishes drawing it, asks me if I want to draw another polyline. I'll say no, I'll right click again. Okay, now it says, do you want to tell me the exit point? Where do I want the embroidery to stop? So I could left click for that, and then it's finished making that line. And if I want to let go of using the tool, I right click again. And now I'm back to the sort of standard select tool, ready to start something new. Now, you'll notice that this line has a satin column. So we drew the center of that line, and then, part of the, I guess, properties of this satin serial is the width of it. So where a single run line doesn't have a width. So if I click on this, you'll see that this is a run stitch. And if I click on this shape, you'll see that it's a satin serial. So when I use my selecting tool to select these different stitches, or different shapes, sorry, you can see what tool was used to make them. So if I come and click on this one, you can see that it was a manual. If I click on this one, it's a run line. If I click on this one, it's a satin serial. So that's the idea. Now, all of those tools were very similar in the way they were made because they are all reliant upon us digitizing a center line, and then when we right click it finishes drawing the line, and we can right click again until it creates the stitches. But the concept is we drew a center line, and something I'll show you right now is for every shape that you make, you can, and I'll just right click over top of this line, okay, and what I've got is a second menu, and we'll be going through the right click menus in a later video, but just to show right now, I've got an option for change to, and I could change this satin serial to be for example a running stitch, and there you have it, it's done. And I could select this running stitch and right click and say change to, and change it to be, oops, a satin serial. So the idea is, even though you've created an object in one style of stitching, you do have the ability to change to different styles. One thing that you might notice about all of the different objects we've created so far, other than the fact that they were all made with that single line tool, is the fact that none of the shapes that I've drawn are what I would call a closed shape. In other words, I can draw this line and right click, and when I let go or when I finish, it leaves it open. And that's very different than, let's say, a filled in shape. So these are what you might call your kind of outline styles of stitches. And just as an example, the next one we'll create will be the step. So we'll go to this one here. And with the step, again, notice that I don't have the auto digitize tool. I simply have the digitize tool. With step, the process to make the object is this. First of all, you have to tell it what, you can tell down at the bottom, look in the bottom left-hand corner, it says give direction. Press the right button to cancel. So if I don't want to use the tool, I can right click to let go and start over. But if I want to use the tool, then the first thing I need to do is give it a direction. So it's saying enter 2 points that tells the software what stitch angle to use. Now it says enter the points of the polyline. In other words, draw the shape. And so very similar to the single line tool, the only difference is now if I right click, it's going to close the shape. See that? So when I right clicked, it joined the last point to the first point and closed the shape. Now if I right click, it asks me if I want to tell it the exit point, and so I'll say, all right, well, finish sewing, how about right down here? And so then it generates the stitches, and you'll see that it's now a filled in shape. Right click to let go of the tool and end the operation. So just to summarize, the difference between, say, the outline and the step was that the shape is closed. And so again, just turn on the tool, give a direction, so 1, 2, and then draw your shape, whatever shape you want. And again, you can hold your shift key down if you want to have cornered shapes versus rounded ones. And then again, when you right click, it's going to close the shape for you. Right click again to finish drawing the shape, and I guess choose an exit point, or right click will just allow the software to select it for you. And right click one last time to finish using the tool and be done, making shapes. There's one more level, I guess, with this, and that is this. For example, I'm going to turn on the tool and give the directions and then draw a shape and right click to finish. Now, right now, if I draw another shape, and then when I right click, you'll notice I drew 2 shapes before I sort of finished making it, and therefore the second shape became sort of a hole within the first shape. And so that's how I was able to do that. Now I'll just maybe show that one more time. So again, click on the Digitize tool, draw the angles, so 1 point, 2 points, then draw your shape, and I'll just hold shift down and draw kind of a box. Right click to let go. It's still asking me to draw points, so I'll draw a little triangle in here. Right click to let go. I could draw a little circle in here. Right click to let go. When I right click a second time, it knows that I'm finished drawing the shape, and it asks me if I want to choose the exit point. If I don't care, I can right click again, and it will create the stitches for me. And if I right click again, it will let go of the tool, and I'm done making that shape. So that's how you, I guess, fill in a shape using the step stitch type. One thing that's interesting about the ability to change between shapes. So remember I showed how you could select an object and then right click for the second menu and choose to change this from a satin serial to, for example, a run stitch. And then I had showed how a lot of the shapes that I made that were in satin serial and in single run line were actually open shapes that didn't close, and that the filled in shapes were closed. Now, if I selected this open satin serial object and right click and then choose to change it to a step, then what happens is it'll actually close that shape for me by drawing a line from the last point to the first point. So you can change it to be a closed shape by simply changing the style of stitch. If I go back and now change this step to be, let's say, a run line, it will actually end up keeping it's still closed, I guess is the point. So yeah, you can easily interchange the shapes with the different styles once you've drawn them. Now let's go and look at the next one, and now we'll change from the step to the satin. And so with satin, the idea is it's going to cover an area. However, you have the ability to create satin with, I guess, turning angle stitching versus parallel stitching. And so that's why when we look over on the left now, we have two choices of tools for satin. We have the Digitize tool and we have the Auto Digitize tool. So I'll show both. We'll start with the Digitize tool. So I'll click on the Digitize tool, and at the bottom it says enter points of the polyline to punch. So similar instructions to last time. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a point, and I'm going to drag across and draw a second point. And you'll notice now that the mouse or the cursor has become connected back to the first point again. And when I click, it becomes connected between the second point and the third point. And what it's doing is it's allowing me to draw sets of points. So I actually call this the 2-point tool, because it's about drawing sets of points. Now, if I right click, it'll finish drawing the points. If I right click again, it will finish drawing the shape. If I right click again, it will default for the, I guess whatever it thinks is the most logical exit point. And if I right click one more time, it lets go of the tool. So what I drew was a shape that looks like it has the outline of this, but I drew that outline by drawing sets of points, 1, 2, and then I put 1, 2, and another 1, 2, and you'll notice that the thread turns, the stitch angles of the thread turn to match the different angles that I drew. So let's just draw another one. So the idea was I'll put in two that are very sort of 90 degrees up and down, and then I'll turn a corner, so I'll put set in that are kind of almost like on 45. And now my corner is going to be rounded because I didn't hold the shift key down, so it turns into a bit of a curve. But the idea is, if I right click to let go, right click to finish, right click to not choose the exit point, the stitches turn from the first set of points to the second set of points to the third set of points. And that's how the satin, I guess, tool works. Now, if I don't care if the stitches turn like this and I prefer to use the outline method, I can also do that. So that's where this Auto Digitize tool becomes helpful, because I get to simply draw the shape of the line. And if I want hard or cornered points, I can make cornered points. But here I'm drawing the line as a shape. and when I right click, it lets go, and I right click and it chooses the exit point and it finishes. And so in this case, one more step comes up where I get to give directions. And so notice right now how my mouse snaps with a little red dot to the edge of the shape, and I can click and drag to make a direction line. And so if I want the stitches to turn a little bit on this, I can draw direction lines on this shape. See what I've done? If I don't like those direction lines, I can click on the little red X in the center of them to remove them. And when I hit right click, it finishes making those angle lines, and if I right click again, it lets go of using the tool. So there becomes, I guess, a little extra step that, so let's just review. Draw the outline of the shape that you wish to draw. It can be any shape. Right click to close. Okay, if there was going to be a hole in it, I could draw it now. Right click to close. Right click to finish. Right click to not choose the exit point, and the software has automatically tried to divide this shape up for us. And it's giving me an angle line that I can, I guess, decide otherwise. So for example, it didn't know how to deal with this hole in the middle. And so I could say, well, you know what, I think I'd like it to go across like this. Maybe even draw another line right here and help it with how to split. If you don't like them, you can click on the red X and draw them in again. If I type on the letter D, it gives me a green dot instead of a red dot. See, I'll click on D again. It's a red dot. Red dot is for angle lines or directions. Type D on my keyboard, changes it between cut lines. So for example, right now, the software kind of has it being cut along this line. If I wanted to cut it along this line, I could draw that line. And I can draw in the angle lines. So the idea here is you get to draw in the, I guess, angles, and you get to draw in the holes. So when you're done doing all that, you right click to let go and right click to finish. And so this is drawing a shape using the outline tool, which is different than drawing the shape using the 2-point tool. So in one tool, you're going to draw sets of points. In the other tool, you're going to draw the outline of the shape. And then you get to draw in angle lines. So if you want something that turns, you can make it turn even though you drew the outline of it. Right click to finish and right click to let go, creating the shape. So the Satin is one of the tools that has two different options of how to, I guess, create it, and it's based upon whatever's probably going to be fastest or easiest for you. The next tool we're going to look at is the Zig Zag tool. So to digitize Zig Zag, first of all, choose Zig Zag in the Object Properties selection box. Again, we have two tools, the Auto Digitize tool and the Digitize tool, and this is exactly the same as it was for Satin. In other words, with the digitizing tool, you digitize sets of points, 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1, 2, and when you right click to let go, it finishes and puts the stitches in. Right click to let go using the tool, and again I'll just show the outline method. So that was the 2-point method. With the outline method, you draw the shape, and then when you're done drawing your shape, you can right click to let go and right click to finish and right click to insert the stitches. Now what's different from, let's say, the Satin Stitch and the Zig Zag, so at first glance they look basically the same, and initially I guess they really are the same, aren't they? These columns can have any stitch angle and they all cover a shape, and the main difference is when you use the Zig Zag tool, you have one of the object properties is for square ends, and when I select for example, one of these satin objects, that square end wasn't one of my options. So there's different, I guess, things that we can control. And with the square end, if I just show, if I change it to be square, and maybe open up the stitch direct density so that you can see through this a little bit, you'll see it gives like a square end to that shape. And I'll even turn off the underlay so you can just see the stitches. So see what it did, and the other option was to have the comb end to it. And so you can see how, I guess, Zig Zag gives you some different styles of stitching, but in general, we create this the same. So just to review again, select the Digitize tool for Zig Zag, and then you're using the 2-point method, which requires you to digitize sets of points, and each set becomes a new stitch angle, and it can have any shape and be any stitch angle you get to choose. And then the other alternative option is to use the outline method, where again you draw the shape by just simply drawing the outline, and then when you right click to finish, it will place the stitches along that for you, and you're given that additional sort of choice of adding in the direction lines. And so, you know, if you want to draw in specific stitch angles, you can. So that's it. This is very similar. Zig Zag and Satin are very similar. Now we'll take a look at the row fill. Okay, so with row fill, the tools are, again, both are available, so the auto digitize and the similar way of drawing them. So if I turn on the digitize tool, I draw in sets of points. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. When I right click to finish, it places the stitches. Now, I'll just right click. You'll notice the style of stitching is very different in row fill because it's filling in my shape by drawing lines of stitches that draw back and forth along, I guess, kind of like a row, as opposed to going the shortest distance across like it does with the satin and the zigzag. And that's primarily, that's the difference. So if I choose the outline tool with row fill and draw in some kind of a line like this, when I right click to finish, it closes the shape. When I right click to finish again, no more holes or anything, right click to finish, and it chooses the stop point for me, and it gives me the ability to draw in some I guess reference points for angle lines to help it with how to place the stitches along the rows. And again, right click to finish, right click to let go of using the tool. So you'll notice that each time you change the style of stitching, that these tools over here change a little bit the way they work. They kind of work very similar, really, but there's subtle differences to them. Okay, so next we'll take a look at the photo stitch. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at creating photo stitch, and I think what I'll do is maybe just start a new window for this, and I'll choose a backdrop. And so I just grabbed a photo of my daughter, Loren, and kind of cropped in on her face to show how I could use this. So I'm just going to say OK, now that I've selected this photograph, and it'll, you know, start a new design and puts her picture on the screen like that. And so yeah, we have photo stitch selected, and I'm just going to come along and choose the tool. So again, there's just the one tool. And again, I need to choose the stitch direction. So it can be any direction you want. Choose a stitch direction, and then you draw the points of your shape. And so it can be any kind of shape you want. If you want to have a rounded shape, you can, or if you want to have a square shape, you just hold your shift key down, and then you can put in corner points to square up your shape however you want it to look. Anyhow, kind of goofy, but that's the shape we'll draw. Right click to finish, right click to let go, and you can see that it enters the sort of stitches into that area, and based upon along that photograph, it puts, basically photo stitch generates rows of stitches that go back and forth and vary their density to relate to the contrast of the dark areas versus the light areas. If I turn off the image for a minute, you can kind of see, you know, what it really looks like. So yeah, anyhow, that's how you can draw the photo stitch with the photo stitch tool. Okay, there's a couple more things that I'd like to show you that I guess relate to digitizing shapes and using the digitizing tools. Before I do that, I'll just quickly point out, for example, I created a new design for this picture of Loren, and if I grab the drop-down menu for window, you can switch back to the original design that we'd been making during this video with all of the shapes, showing all the different tools, and then I created a new design for the photo stitch of Loren. And so the point is, with the window drop-down menu, you can see all of the designs that you have open and quickly switch between them. And when you're drawing shapes, this is one thing I wanted to show. So for example, I have step selected here, and I'm just going to click on a Digitize tool and enter in a stitch angle. And right here, before I start entering the points, if I type S on my keyboard, it gives me an insert shape option box, and I can choose from rectangle, ellipse, quarter circle, semicircle, polygon, arc, spiral, star. The idea is, if I'll just grab on one of these, I can click and drag to create that shape. Right click to finish and right click to let go. And so it can make it quick if you just need to, maybe you're using photo stitch and you just want to draw a box around your photograph, then that's an easy way to do it. So again, you select your tool, draw the stitch angle, and then type S on the keyboard, and it brings up the ability to draw an ellipse or a star or a polygon or whatever kind of shape you want. Oh, didn't I change it to star? Let's see here, I'll do that again. I must not have, obviously. Type S, choose star, say OK, and then when I click and drag, I should get a star shape. Right click to finish, and so you get the idea that you get to create the shapes quickly that way. And similarly, if I choose this and I want to enter in a single character from a letter style, so I'm just going to, again, draw on a stitch angle and then type in T on my keyboard, and it brings up the ability to select from any number of, fonts or your style, your letter styles, and then you could, click on that and then type in the character you want, whatever it is, and so that makes it possible to insert a letter like this as an embroidery object, which you can then fill with any style of stitching or whatever. And it's different than using the lettering toolbar to do that. And there's one more thing. If we go through the tools and say insert symbol, this will allow you to actually look at all of the different letter styles that you've got with symbols in them. And so some of the ones that I often go to, these are sort of media symbols like DVD, and compact disc, but you've got webdings and windings that have all kinds of interesting little symbols. You've also got all of the sort of international styles of lettering, and so you can choose this as a way to insert an individual character from a font like that. So those are the different kind of ways to create objects. And so we've looked at, how to use the tools and how they relate to all the different styles of object properties. And in the next video, we're going to try to go through and review what all of the different settings are and what they mean for each of the styles of embroidery.